This video is part 3 of my build of the E-2A Hawkeye of VAW-112 Golden Hawks in my 1968 USS Enterprise Project, the ship in 1-720 and all the Carrier Air Wing 9 aircraft in 1-72. Alright, finish it in February is over. So I'm back to working on the E2. And I'm going to complete the plane, more or less stages 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7 in the instructions, although not necessarily in that exact order. The first thing I want to do is work on these engine nacelles, similar to on the fuselage where I filled in here so you couldn't see through. I want to do the same thing on the engines. Here you can see in and through, same thing back here. First, I want to see what kind of space I need to work with. So I'm just looking to see where that panel can come across, like realistically where it might be. So basically it's going to be something like that. I want to be above this and then between the propeller and this intake, kind of like that. I traced the outline of the engine nacelle onto thin sheet styrene and cut it out. Then I sanded and filed one side of that piece to fit inside one nacelle half. Once I had that right, I marked and cut off that half and traced it onto another sheet, flipped it over, and traced the other half to get a full correct piece. Then repeatedly filed and test fit that piece, and once I had it perfect, traced it onto another sheet to make the second one. Alright, I've got these how I want them. Now I'm going to attach them with the Tamiya extra thin cement. And I made these so that you can't see through through the exhaust down. So I'm putting these in there and then I'm going to glue these in place, and then that should do it for improving these engine nacelles. So I just filled those gaps in with thick super glue. I'll show another reference photo. I mean, these are black inside when you're looking from behind, so I'm going to be painting those inside of those black, so it should kind of hide any seams or whatever. Next, I glued the two main wing hats together, working my way from one end to the other with medium thick super glue, clamping it along the way, then coming back and touching any remaining gaps with Tamiya ultra thin cement. Okay, so while the wing dries, I'm going to come back to these now that these are dry and clean these up. The seam line needs to be cleaned up. Same thing here. There's some flash in there. Clean those openings up. Redo any rivet lines. Now that I have these, the way that I want them, I'm fitting them to the wing. I had some fit issues, which basically just required sanding here and there to get those fit issues to go away. Getting this to fit to the wing, getting this connection point pretty clean. I've got it as close as I can. You can see the array of tools I had to use to get it there. I also started filling these indentations in the back of the propellers and also started filling in those weird lines in the tips of the propellers. So now I'll let that dry. I also attached the center pillar on the windshield with a tiny drop of super glue at the top and bottom. After the gap-filling super glue dried, I sanded down the plugs with progressively finer sanding sticks to get rid of the indentations in the propeller roots and at the propeller tips. References show an intake-like structure above the wing fuselage seam. However, the kit-provided part doesn't have the intake open, so I made a series of holes along the front of that piece using my pin vise drill, then used a small circular file to connect them all together to represent that opening. So I just finished cleaning up these surfaces here to get the wing to fit. This had some fit issues as well, and I'll pop a couple of close-up pictures in there. But I think I have it pretty good now. This fits much better. This fits better here. I'm going to glue the wing in place. I believe I have it perpendicular. I applied Tamiya ultra thin cement to all of the seams between the wing and the fuselage, top and bottom. then went back with thin super glue and touched just a drop in a few spots to fill a few very minor gaps. Okay, it's a couple of hours later, so let's see how this came out. It's a nice fit, if you can see that there. I'm happy. Per several of these reference photos, including the actual subject itself, here I can show you right here. So this is E2 from the 1968 yearbook, and if you can see here, the tips of the propellers are actually flat with a slight hole in them. You can see that here, there's a hole there. Here's the actual subject itself. So I'm going to do that now. Basically just taking that round edge off and just flattening it. That's plenty right there. I filed flat the tips of the nose cones, then centered and drilled holes in them with my pin vise drill to make them accurate to my references. Before I put these together, they have some ejection pin marks on them. Some flash in here that needs to be cleaned up. Then this hole needs to be able to receive this. I fill the ejection pin marks with medium super glue, then clean up the dome center pole. These, they've got seams. I'm going to clean those up. Clean that up. I scrape and sand the seams on the antenna parts. This is dry, so I'm going to go ahead and sand these down. Get rid of this flash. I'll glue these together. It looks good around the outside, but underneath here I want to clean that up and make that look good. I clean up the seams on the radar disc support structure, then open the top hole with a round file. Then I test fit the support structure and open up the two areas that receive the rear legs of that structure with my knife and files for a better fit. Time to put the tail section together. These four sections are perpendicular, so you can see this is angled. These actually go perpendicular to the wing, so like that. I glued the four tail rudders into position on the rear wing with ultra-thin Tamiya cement. So everything is perpendicular, and I'm just going to let it set like that overnight. The other thing I want to do is put these pieces in the engine nacelles so that later on I can glue the propellers on, like that. So I want these pieces in the engine nacelles, and I want them in there straight. I have these third hand tools, so I just put them in here so they'll hang straight down and level. And then what I'm going to do is drop these in there and just touch that with the cement from underneath. Let those dry like that. And then yet another piece that needs to go together is this into here. Sit in there. So this stuff melts the plastic, so I want to give it at least 12 hours to fully re-solidify. Now that the post is in, I'm going to join these two. Just want to make sure I have this going the right way. I marked where the positioning posts are, then dabbed medium super glue on those posts, joined the two halves together, then went all the way around the seam with Tamiya thin cement. I'm going to attach a bunch of these smaller pieces to the fuselage, starting with this piece on the bottom. And then I'm going to attach this to this, but I'm going to wait to put this on until after I do some painting, because this holds the tail hook, and that tail hook has black and white stripes. So I'm going to assemble as far as I can before I have to start painting. This I think I'm going to use super glue and actually maybe go from the bottom. That way I won't get any round on the outside. Yeah, that worked. I'm going to take the same approach here. That is right down on there, without any gaps, so I think if I just glue it in the middle and get it straight, I should be okay. I placed the intake structure with some medium super glue. Let that dry. Next, I placed the radar disc support structure with the pinion under it on the fuselage and taped it into position. I test fit the disc on top of it and made sure everything lined up. Then I applied Tamiya ultra-thin cement to where each of the legs rest on the fuselage and the pinion between the two. Then I went back with medium super glue to fill a few minor gaps. Next, I carefully clamped the tail elevator and rudders into position over the rear of the fuselage and checked to ensure that it was straight and the same height above the main wing on each side. Then I ran Tamiya ultra-thin cement along the seams on both sides and on the top connection point. Slight gap right there, but I can fill that later. I'll let this dry. For these last two parts that go in the center here, they go between the front two legs of the support structure for the radar disc. They are a pain in the butt. Basically, they go right here from this hole. One goes this way and one goes that way, and the other end up under here. And I've been struggling trying to get them in there because they have to come together in the middle at the bottom, and then Y up and connect up there. And I'm struggling with, do I glue them in at the bottom? And then once they're in, it's hard to separate them apart to Y up there. So I thought I'd put a piece of sticky tack in the middle, which would help me, at least get me started on the Y. Maybe I also put a piece of sticky tack down in that hole to kind of hold them at the bottom. But you got to get them up underneath there, get it down into that hole, then bring them back up into that notch. Not fun. Okay. Ooh, this is the furthest I've ever gotten on this. Alright, so now, see, I've got it down in there. Got it in the notch. Now those two at the top need to come apart. Stick this in there and see if that'll spring them apart. It's popping out at the bottom. This is the problem I keep having. If I get it at the top, it pops out at the bottom. Alright, I actually like that one. And I'll glue from behind it. Alright, here goes nothing. Okay, that's one side. This may be one of those situations where you just say, good enough, and they're pretty straight. They're not glued at the bottom, they're just held with sticky tack. I'm going to let that glue at the top dry, and then I'll touch a drop of the sticky tack at the bottom. That's what's going on there. I think that'll have to do it. So I'll let that dry at the top, those tops dry, and then I'll glue it at the bottom. Then the last thing is these two go here and here. This one goes here. And then these two go here and here. But I'm gonna wait on these two. So I wanna do some painting on this before I attach this. And then when I attach them, I may have to do some cleanup on these edges. So one of the last things I'll do before painting the top gray is place these in there. These have this point here. I'm going to cut them off there to leave something to put into the hole. I remove the antenna pieces from their sprue, place them in their holes, and glue them with Tamiya cement. Then I finally glue the bottom two disc support structure pieces to the fuselage with a few drops of medium super glue. I think I'm happy with that. Okay, it's the next day. I'm going to see how this stuff came out. Alright. Pretty happy with the way that came out. Looks pretty good. Everything lines up, matches up. Everything looks straight down the middle. These seams look really good. Alright. So now that I have the main portion of the plane done, this is my stopping point for this video. Basically, I have it down to sub-assemblies, and I'm going to now paint in the next video, paint each of these sub-assemblies, then finish constructing the full plane, and then decal and weather it. So I have obviously the plane itself. I have the engines, which I want to do some detail painting on. There's various metal sections on here that require some close masking, so I'm going to leave those off. Then once I put those on, then I'll put these antenna pieces above them, just in case I have fit issues when I connect those. Obviously the propellers will be black. I'll need to do those. Both sets of landing gear, front and sides. The radar disc, I want to paint that separately, as it has color on each side and then the different color around the outside. Tail hook needs to be have stripes on it. Then I'll connect that piece, and I think it'll be easier to paint and mask the various colors on the plane itself. So basically this is what will be next: painting and decaling the plane to make it look like this one, the E-2A from VAW-112 Golden Hawks from 1968. So that does it for this video. Thanks for watching, and as always, happy modeling.